Okay, so, I'm going to do this fairly quickly because I have food in the oven and I'm very, very hungry. So I picked a really good time to do this. Hi everybody, it's Jade, and this month I read 6 books, so I'm going to talk about them now. Okay, as has become the thing on this channel, I'll start with the audiobooks that I read. I only listened to one audiobook this month. I started another one, I haven't finished it yet, so that'll obviously be in next month's wrap up. But the audiobook I read, I have a physical copy of, is Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams, and yeah, this was a 1-star. Technically a DNF. I DNF'd with like maybe 2 hours left to go, because even though I was like, right, well I've already listened to like, I don't know, 7 hours of this, but I just need to stop because I am just infuriated the entire time. So yeah, did not enjoy this book, and should probably have had this as my biggest disappointment for the year in my previous video. I feel like I've blocked it out, how much it infuriated me, because it's just, oh my god. This had a lot in common in the things that I disliked about it, that I think like the #1 worst book on my list of 2021 worst books had, which was Forgive Me Leonard Peacock. In the vein of, you have a main character who, awful stuff has happened to her in the past, absolutely, and for some reason that's supposed to mean that we forgive all of the shit that she does. Like, in Forgive Me Leonard Peacock, and in the same way as well, it's just, for the entirety of the book, this is an awful person who's just making stupid choices that are just infuriating me, and treating all of the people around her like absolute crap, and then wondering why she feels like lonely and stuff. And it's just intimated that there's something that happened in her past that was awful, and therefore everything else doesn't matter. And then it's dropped right at the end what it was, and you're like, so? Like, yeah, obviously, on the whole, that is an awful thing to have happened, but you've made me hate this character so much that I don't care that this happened to her. And I'm being quite vague, but yeah, Queenie as a character absolutely infuriated me, which is not to say that all the other characters were any better, because it was like the writer realised somehow that the main character was awful, therefore she had to make all of the other characters even worse to have even the chance of us like giving a shit about what she's going through, and it's amazing how that didn't work. So yeah, she is like, Queenie's friends exist just so that she can complain to them, and just so that they can, like, absolve her of the awful things that she's doing, or the stupid decisions that that's the thing, is that nothing she does is, like, super bad. It's just stupid and is going to bite her in the butt. And I think in my review, I left quite a long ranty review on Goodreads that I will maybe link below, I don't know. Like, this book should have just been called, What Do You Mean There Are Consequences to My Actions? Because she's so genuinely shocked when stupid things she does that people have told her, that's going to bite you in the ass, comes back and bites her in the ass. So if any of her friends ever are like, well, actually, the thing that you're doing is probably a bad idea, and like, maybe you shouldn't do it, she like accuses them of not being good friends. Or if she just like expects them to drop everything in their lives, like, for her, and they're like, well, sorry, I'm busy, like, I have stuff to do, I have my own life to live. She's like, well, you're just an awful friend. And considering that the main crux of this book is like about the fact that Queenie is a black woman, and like the racism that she deals with, which there are like majorly like racist characters in this book. Yeah, absolutely. Some of them feel quite caricaturist, but that's not the way you pronounce that word, but I think you know what I mean. And obviously being a white woman, I can't say that that's not what happens. because I fully believe that there are people out there like that. But in the same vein, like, the only Jewish character in this book that is in there for any amount of time is such a stereotypical Jewish character that it was super offensive. Like, she is just, like, what I think Americans call, like, a Jewish queen or Jewish princess or something like that, where, like, she's just obsessed with money, she, like, having nice things, just doesn't understand that Queenie doesn't have money, gets all of her money from her, like, her dad and stuff like that. And then the only, like, Pakistani character is just an awful human being as well, who cheats on his wife and speaks with a really, like, offensive accent. And yeah, so, and even the other black characters just feel like caricatures when I was reading it. And, like, and another thing where I was like, seriously, girl, like, what is wrong with you? In that she is shocked, spoiler, genuinely shocked when her boss, like, suspends her, and, like, shocked that she's not getting promotions and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, so you're late to work constantly, you don't do work when you're at work. Like, there is a scene in this book where her boss, who is, like, trying so hard, comes over to her and is like, Queenie, you have to do some work. And she's like, yes, absolutely, I'm going to buckle down and do work. And literally, whilst her boss is stood there, just turns and wanders over to her friend. And her boss has to literally grab her by the shoulder and be like, no, do work. And then when she's like, wait, like, why am I being suspended? I try so hard. And I'm like, you don't. You really don't. You don't try at all. All of the men that you date are... This is a complete non sequitur, and I should have, like, paused then. All the men you date are trash. Like, they are all trash, and they're all super interchangeable with each other. And the thing is, you know this going into it. You know that they're trash, and then you're shocked that they're trash. And, like, I'm just going to stop now, because this book infuriates me, and I was like... I was looking forward to reading this, and, yeah, it was just a bit of disappointment. So, yeah, that was that one. That was a really good way to start... this video with just a really long rant about this book I hated. Moving on to better things, and also a better, in my opinion, book about race and, like, racism and stuff like that. Obviously, take all of this with a pinch of salt. I am a white woman, and I understand that I am speaking from a place of privilege. Didn't stop that from just royally pissing me off. The next book I read was Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reid. I gave this a 4-star. I much preferred this. It felt more real and less caricaturistic. I'm going to just stop using that word because I clearly can't say it. This is set in America and follows the story of, what was the main character? Amira, who is a babysitter who gets... I thought it was apprehended by the police. It's not that. She gets stopped by a supermarket security who believe that she has kidnapped the little white girl that she looks after. And that whole thing sparks, like, a conversation about race and privilege and all that stuff with her employer, with her new boyfriend. Again, other than Amira is like a decent person, which is probably why it infuriated me less, because, like, the person that we were following, I didn't hate. I was like, yes, no, you are dealing with stuff, and also, like, there were certain times where she maybe backed down when she maybe shouldn't have, and could have had a bit more of a backbone, but also I couldn't, like, dislike her for that. But, like, yeah, so, like, her boss is not a good person, her boyfriend is not a good person, spoiler alert. And yet, like, going through it, you're reading it and you're like, oh god, like, that was insensitive to do that. That was actually quite racist to do that, in, like, subtle microaggression kind of ways that just build up, and you're like, yeah, it makes you... It's like a talk of the fact that the two main, like, white characters in this consider themselves liberals and quite open-minded and very much not racist, and it was a conversation of, like, how people like that can still do racist things and being stuck in their own little bubble of privilege, like, refuse to see that, which is something that I very much try not to do myself. And I'm not saying that I am amazing at that and that I don't do things that everyone has a knee-jerk reaction if someone's like, hey, that's offensive. I try very much to not be like I'm a good person. I'm not like I feel like I'm getting better at it. I'm like, I will stop and I will think about it and be like, I apologise, I will endeavour not to do that again, and I will look into why that is offensive. And sometimes I won't agree and sometimes I will. I'm trying not to, after how long I talked about that first book, I'm going to try not to, like, go on at length about all of these other ones. Even though I liked them a lot more. The next book I read was my buzzword pick for the month, which was a book with all or alls in the title. So I went with All the Young Men by Ruth Cocker Burks, because I can't pronounce that middle name, I don't think, correctly. This one was a 4-star. This is a memoir. I really enjoyed this. As I said in my mid-year freak-out tag, I was strong all the way through until, like, the last couple of pages where I broke and cried. It's quite a heavy book. I mean, it deals with the AIDS crisis in the 80s in small-town Southern America. Very, like, Christian... I said that like... I realised I said that word like it was a bad word. But you know what, like, that kind of God hates gays Christian kind of thing where, which is, like, there is a dichotomy in that Ruth is a very God-fearing woman who fully believes in, like, Jesus is her saviour and all that stuff. And, like, the difference between, like, her faith tells her that it's her duty to look after these people and to, mostly because they've been abandoned by their families, and that, like, offends her deeply. Like, her sensibilities of, no, this is your child, you love this person, regardless, like, how dare you? Contrasted with, like, her church and some people that she knows who are like, well, this person has gotten AIDS because that's, like, God's way of telling them that being gay is wrong. And she's like, that's stupid. What, like, no, it's a disease that they've gotten because people are uneducated in how to stop this from spreading and stuff like that. So I am going to make it my job to look after these people as they're dying, whilst also trying to spread awareness so fewer people die. And then she becomes really good friends with, like, the local queer community and stuff like that. And it's, yeah, the story of her and her friendship with these people and how it felt like... I think the reason the last couple of pages and, like, last chapter or so got me was that the last chapter was her reflecting on how traumatizing losing an entire generation of people is. Not just to her, but to other queer people in that community. And it kind of resonated with me as a gay woman, that we lost a generation, and we don't have that older generation of queer people the way that straight people have that older generation to look to. I'm not saying they're all gone, but we lost so many people. And yeah, it was a very important read. It was quite heavy, like I said. There's no let up. It is from start to finish. She is on the daily having to bury people. And, like, whilst also, like, trying to raise her daughter and pay her bills and stuff like that. And it was a hard life, but it was a good life, and she did it for for good reasons and stuff like that. And I would highly recommend it. But I would also highly recommend being in the right headspace for it. After that, I read my classic pick for the month. This was a children's classic, and I read Heidi by Joanna Spyri. I gave this a 3-star. It's definitely very clearly a children's book, and in that sense I felt like it was a little bit... Like, there are some children's books that someone of any age can read and enjoy. For example, TJ Klune's books are mostly aimed at younger readers, and yet I feel like anyone could read them and get something from that. Whereas this was definitely, I'm too old for this book. It also, I think, like, it was lovely. It reminded me very much of, like, Pollyanna and Anne of Green Gables, that kind of vibe, I think, in that it was, you have a main character who is so pure and innocent and just slightly weird because of that. Like, they just don't get social cues of the way society tells children or just people that they need to be, that they can't, you know, like, just spend their time out in the wilderness being a bit weird, but through not realising that they should, you know, hide that, which they shouldn't, they, like, improve the lives of the people around them. So it was like I was reading it feeling like I read this story before, and yeah, I just didn't get an awful lot out of it, I don't think, but it was, I feel like it would be a good story to read to a child at, like, bedtime, I think. But yeah, I didn't love it, didn't hate it. It was just a bit of a, I've read that. Next, sorry, my stomach is grumbling. Next, a book that I did very much enjoy and that I have been very much looking forward to reading, so even though it wasn't on my TBR for this month, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to read it because it's a graphic novel, so it won't take me that long. I read Heimat by Nora Krug. This is a, like I said, graphic novel. I gave it a 4-star. It's sort of like written almost, it's a memoir, but in a graphic novel format of a woman, like, I didn't realise the word Heimat means home, like, not necessarily the home that you currently have, but a home that you grew up in that you are nostalgic for, almost. And her talking about her German she is German, she is a German who now lives in America, but was born, raised in Germany, German parents, all that stuff, and a whole discussion, the whole book is based around the fact that German people are not raised, or at least her generation, were not raised to be proud of where they come from, or anything like that, because they're still feeling the ramifications of what that kind of zealous pride results in. And to be honest, like, as someone who is not particularly patriotic, because I find patriotism a bit weird, like, I find it weird to be proud of something that I had no hand in. Like, it's not an achievement that I was born English, it's just something I am. But I also don't, like, hate where I come from. There are issues with England, very much so. But I don't hate it. I don't feel ashamed to be English, but I'm also not proud to be English. I'm very neutral to where I come from. And so I do find it weird that, like, I actually feel like the people who are the most nationalistic, and I'm not saying there aren't nationalism in this country, because, like, the BNP exists, and I know people that are very Britain for the British kind of thing, and it's just bizarre. But, like, I feel like America is very, well, they are very, we're the best, we're the greatest. They indoctrinate their children into doing this weird cult-like Pledge of Allegiance every single day, and it's so bizarre. Like, I don't understand how people don't see that as weird and indoctrinating, and very similar to the Hitler Youth. Like, this is not me saying that America is bad, I'm just saying that aspect of American culture where it is that you believe, like, that, that some Americans believe that they are the best and they're the greatest, and just ignore the glaring problems with their country. Like, it's almost like you can't say anything bad about America if you are American, because it's the greatest, and therefore problems can get worse and worse because you don't look at them as problems, because you can't have problems in the greatest country in the world. Like, that kind of thing. Very much gone on a side tangent. Anyway, back to this book. So basically, Nora was raised to almost be ashamed of being German and have no pride in the fact that she was German. And the only pride that comes from being German is from knowing that your family had nothing to do with Nazism, or that they were like rebellious towards Nazism or something like that. And so if there is even like a hint of having been part of the Nazi party, having fought in the war for the side of the Nazis, even if they didn't necessarily like believe in that, they were just conscripted in. They were sent to the Hitler Youth because it was mandatory, such and such. Was sort of very, very much put like shoved under the rug, and that person like erased from family history almost. So this whole book is a family like scrapbook of her going back into her family tree on both sides and finding out what her grandparents' role in the war was, with a undercurrent of fear the entire time that she's going to find out that like a family member was a Nazi, and not in a way of they registered as part of the Nazi party to save themselves and their family, but was like actually believed that. So it's another like fairly heavy book, but I feel like the graphic novel aspect of it lightens that slightly. But there is just a whole... It's a great book, and I really enjoyed reading it, but it's also not super happy. There is a very much a matter-of-fact tone to it, intermingled with some quite horrific stories, I have to say, but I don't know, that seems to be my jam. We know this about me. I seem to like depressing things. But again, it didn't read as depressing. It's very bright and colourful. It's just, there's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance reading this because of the imagery and then the subject matter. And the final book that I read this month, and I definitely ended the month on a high note because this was a 5-star and I loved it, was Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Absolutely loved this book so much. This is definitely like on par with the Star... actually, maybe not quite on par with the Star Sea. I actually felt a bit bad saying that because I'm not sure if anything can quite hit that. But in terms of like Star Sea, the Song of Achilles, that kind of... I absolutely love this. Is probably never going to leave my shelf kind of book. It had a lot of Starless Sea vibes, I'm going to say, in that it's very beautifully written and slightly... like, not super plot heavy. It's slightly weird in the way it tells its story. But Piranesi is about a character who lives in what he calls the house. It's a series of, like, endless rooms that have these beautiful statues in. Some of them are underwater, where he, like, hunts for food, for, like, fish and stuff. Some have clouds going through them if they're, like, high up. And Piranesi is a scientist. He spends his time documenting like what statues are in what room, and like making lists of when the tides are, like, and when the super high tides are and stuff like that. But there's definitely, like, as you're reading it, there is an undercurrent of what's going on here. Like, I thought I knew where it was going, and I was kind of right, but it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. But yes. Yeah, I did. It was one of those things I was reading that I was like, I actually kind of really want to live in that world. Like, it seems so calm and very nice and pristine, and Piranesi very much loves the house, and he calls himself the beloved child of the house, and he thinks the house loves him as well, and it provides for him, and it's all about balance and caring about where you live, which I think is the main through line of loving where you live and looking after it and making sure that it is looked after. I just said the same thing twice. Looking after it and making sure it's looked after. But having like a reverence for it, and I think it's a whole metaphor of like loving the world that we live in and looking after it and making sure that it stays not pristine but well cared for the people that come after us. and stuff like that, and not doing it for a reward of any kind, but doing it because that's the thing to do, is to be a steward for this place, because this world doesn't exist for us. We exist within this world, and we should look after it because it will look after us in return, and that's just the balance, that's just the deal of living in this world. Okay, so that was it felt very disjointed, and I'm going to blame that on the fact that I'm very hungry right now. But that was my wrap up for the books that I read in June. Have you read any of the books that were in that list? Do you agree with me? Do you very much disagree with me? I feel like I had some very strong opinions this month, more so than in other videos, so I feel like there might be a lively discussion if people had very opposing opinions to what I got out of these books. But if you do, please leave a comment, give me your opinion, just be respectful of each other. Please consider following me on Bookstagram if you want to read reviews of books as and when I read them. I don't tend to put my negative reviews on there because, I don't know, if I dislike a book, I'm not going to take a photo of it. So you wouldn't find my long ranty review of Queenie on there. If you want to be my friend on Goodreads, that's where I put my long ranty reviews. I will put links to them down below. As always, be kind to yourself and be kind to others, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.